Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Just a little reminder, we're gonna do 2-minute opening for each candidate, and then they have 2 minutes to answer each question with a 2-minute closing, with a 1-minute closing. And I would like to invite our Los Angeles County Sheriff candidates. We have LASD Lieutenant Eric Strong with us. Long Beach City Police Chief Robert Luna. LASD Chief Eli Vera. Okay, thank you and welcome. We are going to start down at the end with Eli Vera. You can go ahead and give your 2 minutes and then we'll move right down to the end.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, I want to acknowledge those of you who have worked so diligently in our ports, moving the commerce through. As a resident of Los Angeles County, we're all very grateful for your efforts. A little bit about myself. My name's Eli Vera. I'm born and raised Angelino. My mother immigrated to this country with my sister. I was raised in Section 8 housing in downtown Los Angeles, and I'm a product of the Los Angeles Unified School District. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I served as a Presidential Honor Guard in Washington, D.C., and I've been with the Sheriff's Department some 33 years. I spent probably half of my career working patrol in South Los Angeles, serving those communities. I've worked every major assignment or division in the Sheriff's Department, and I promoted up through the ranks through Division Chief. In addition, I've led some of the most successful enforcement efforts to lower violent crimes in Los Angeles, but more importantly, I've worked tirelessly investing back into our community, specifically with our at-risk youth. When we created programs when I was commanding officer of South Los Angeles that after-school programs, tutoring programs, mentoring programs, job opportunities for our children, many opportunities that would prevent them from falling into the criminal justice system. That's something that I've been passionate about throughout my whole life. Personally, my wife and I were foster parents to the kids that we encountered in patrol that were falling into the system. We opened the doors of our home to try to help shape their lives in a more positive manner. And that's what I bring to you today, is a balanced form of leadership that understands that we've done public safety, but we have to invest in our future and our kids and be that type of leader.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Next. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cecil Rambo, running for LA County Sheriff. I'm a almost lifelong. I was born in South Korea and adopted and brought to Compton and grew up in South Central in the Compton area. I've been a resident of the South Bay San Pedro area for over 23 years now. I spent my entire adult life as a public servant. I started in 1976 as a young lifeguard for LA County Parks, teaching kids how to swim and being a swim coach. I have a degree from Humboldt State University in sociology, and I have a master's in organizational leadership degree from Woodbury University. I began my 33-year career in the Sheriff's Department in 1981, where I worked over 17 different assignments and held every rank up to the rank of Assistant Sheriff. When I retired in 2014, there was no higher ranking person in the Sheriff's Department other than the Sheriff himself. I've also spent time as an undercover agent for the FBI. I've worked internal affairs twice, once as a sergeant and then as a supervisor in internal affairs. I led the Asian Organized Crime Task Force, where I did community outreach to API communities and investigated crimes committed by or against people in the API community. I also sat as the executive from the Sheriff's Department on the AB 109 Prison Realignment Committee. The Community Corrections Partner Committee led the prison realignment here in the County of Los Angeles, where I work with alternatives to incarceration, developing reentry programs and working with probation and parole on how alternatives to incarceration look for non-violent, non-serious, non-sex offenders. I'm now currently the Chief of Police at the largest aviation police department in the nation, the 4th largest police department here in Los Angeles County. I also spent 5 years as a city manager in the cities of Compton and Carson, and you can see some of my work to this day in terms of housing development and economic development in both municipalities. I'm supported by over 100 elected state, local, and elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Strong, and I'm happy to be here. So glad to be back in San Pedro. I spent some of my youth playing baseball and football at Peck Park. So glad to be here. You know, I just want to say that where we are today, right now, with law enforcement, is not where we have to be. Our headlines do not have to be about deputy gangs. It doesn't have to be about bad shootings or abuses in our jail. We're here because of years and years and decades of failed leadership. You know, I have almost 30 years in this profession. I span 3 different agencies. I consider myself an outsider, kind of on the inside when it comes to the work that I've done. I've worked most of my career in a patrol function, being on tactical teams, being a training officer, being a gang investigator. I spent a portion of my career in one of the most affluent areas in Pasadena, up in the hills, where I learned that it doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter what demographic, what socioeconomic neighborhood that you're in. The key to doing this job right is to doing it with community engagement, respect, dignity, and compassion for everybody that we come in contact with. And that's what I'm bringing to the table. I'm endorsed by Stonewall because they know with me, they're gonna get compassion, respect, and a seat at the table, not only a seat, but a voice. I'm also endorsed by several community members and interventionists and community engagers, because that's what they want. They want somebody that's real, that's gonna bring to the table what we actually need. I'm the only candidate up here today that did not have to change his party registration to be sitting here asking for this endorsement. I'm the only candidate up here that brings the well-rounded overall package of what's needed in this job. I'm the only candidate that has offered to open up his personnel file so that you can see my background and my history. You won't spend time or money or resources defending my past because it's clean and that's intentional. I respected what I was supposed to do, the policies and the laws that were put before me. I ask for your endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be here in front of you, and very happy that you made the time to be here. I think this is one of the most important sheriff races ever. My name is Robert Luna, and I'm running to be your sheriff. I'm running to reduce crime, to make our streets safer. I want to impact homelessness the way we have in Long Beach, which you heard about in the last session. And I want to restore public trust, reform and modernize the sheriff's department. And if you look at my track record, which I'll talk about, I am a 21st century executive who thinks in transformation and the way policing should be today and tomorrow, not yesterday. I'm the only candidate that comes from outside the sheriff's department. That means I've never worked there, and I don't work there now. I'm the only candidate who I believe can deliver true reform, making it a forward-thinking organization, very open to change and innovation. As the Long Beach Police Chief for the last 7 years, I have led the second largest police department in LA County. I have been accountable to our public and have taken responsibilities for all the actions of my department, and I carry that with integrity, experience, and the right temperament. I have led the department towards community-based policies and practices modeled by the Task Force on 21st Century Policing that was put forth by President Obama back in 2014. My top priorities when I'm elected to sheriff, 1, will be to restore the public trust and credibility of a great department. Number 2, to reform and modernize the department, which includes our jails. 3, to reduce violent crime. Number 4, to impact homelessness. And number 5, to impact employee and deputy wellness, which is very much needed in a lot of the issues that will come up today, and that's from a leadership perspective. A little bit about my background. I grew up in a Latino working class neighborhood, immigrant family. That's where I base my relationship-based policing from. That's where transforming to policing. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move right along to our questions and answers. We have Joe Gatlin, founder and vice president of the San Pedro Wilmington NWSPNC branch 1069. Thank you, Joe, and welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, officers, for being here. I'm a resident of Pedro, and so I'm welcome you all for being here today. My question is basically, a man of color, whenever we see a policeman knock on our door or drive up behind us, there's fear, and there's a reason for that. My question is, what things are you doing, or what you would do, to lower that? And I'm giving an example. 3 or 4 years ago, when there were a lot of blacks being pulled over for shootings, and it was a big deal, our NWSPNC went to the Harbor Division, brought them to our local church, and had them meet with the local community so they knew who the leaders were. Not only to that, they would then go to our Juneteenth celebration and play ball with the kids. One of the things was, I still remember one of the sheriffs actually got in a 3-legged race with one of the 12-year-old black girls. It was a big deal, but it took away that only time we saw people in uniform was when they were arresting us or shooting at us and terrifying us. And lastly, I want to go on this just for a second. I had a family member being pulled over just for traffic, nothing serious, but she had her daughter in the back seat who was only 4 or 5 years old. Before the officers could even get to the car, they had to calm her down in the back seat because she was so terrified. So nothing happened. There was no shooting, whatever, but so terrified because an officer came to the car, because that's all they know in the black community is fear. So what programs would you do to lower the temperature and make us feel more welcome when we see a person in uniform approaching us either at our door or pulling us over? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe, for the question. Okay, we're going to rotate through, and we are going to start with Lieutenant Eric Strong. Thank you.
You bring up some very poignant points here. As a young man growing up here in Los Angeles County, as a young black man, I've experienced driving while black. I've been pulled over, profiled, roughed up, had many negative interactions with law enforcement, and interesting enough is I still get pulled over sometimes, and the reality of it is I can kind of diffuse that situation. My wife and I spent years working at youth centers, building programs for kids, writing curriculums, and during that time, that is when they really get to see the true nature of a person and not just a uniform. I think it's important that we increase engagement. I think that our department right now is doing a very poor job at community engagement, but it's also important that we educate our deputies. That's the most important thing. I don't think the training that we give is relevant, and when I speak to that, I mean the training in diversity, dealing with diverse communities, implicit bias. Right now it's a checkbox. We go through it, we check it off the box, we say they did it, and we send the APIS roster on up to the state saying, yeah, they've all been trained. But it's got to be relevant. They have to be able to engage with the communities that they work in. We have to also do a better job of assigning our deputies to the communities where they want to work and where they can look like the communities where they work. Hiring is a big thing. Right now the department is 8% African American. Here's the problem with that. Everybody for years has always said we match the demographic of the county, but that's the wrong barometer to use. We're 8%, however, we make up in the high 40s and low 50s of contacts, arrests, and use of force. So we need to really engage with our recruitment, our hiring process, get more people involved that look like the community, and then we need to make that reach out, that outreach to the community. With the sheriff's department, when you go to a community event, it's usually the captain or the watch commander that's sent. Very rarely do you actually see the deputies there. Those are the ones that need to be in these community events at the churches, talking and getting to know people. That's how we'll improve this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are going to move to Chief Vera.
That's a great question. As a Latino growing up here in Los Angeles, I know those challenges because I've experienced them myself. I think most of us here on stage have probably, one way or another, have come across those experiences. But one of the things that we can and should do, and that I did very successfully, and probably what I was most passionate about when I was a commanding officer over South Los Angeles, is building relationships. Like Eric was talking about earlier, you know, most of the time it's the commanding officer of the station that goes and meets with the churches and the communities and things of that nature. That is something that I completely steered away from as the commanding officer, I brought my deputies with me. And I would bring deputies that have never been in that environment and put them in the situation to get to know the community on a first name basis. I got our deputies out of the radio cars and walking in the communities, engaging our community members. I challenged them many a times, referring specifically to maybe somebody on a corner that was out at a certain time watering their lawn. Somebody had been,
Chief, do you mind holding the microphone up a little bit closer? There you go.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Truly getting to know those that we're here to serve. It's all about relationships and trust. If you stay in your police car day in and day out, and you don't get out of your car, and you don't get to know people on a first name basis, you're always going to be that cop. And that isn't what modern day policing should be. Modern day policing should be relationship based. And it has to be from the top all the way to the bottom, us creating those relationships, listening to those that have grievances against law enforcement, and not just listening, responding to their grievances, being open to changing the organization so that we can better protect the communities. Because we can't protect our communities if we don't have their trust. And that's what's killing us right now, is the complete lack of public trust today. So I think that it's something that can be done. We are primarily a minority sheriff's department. Now we have to take it to the next level and build relationships.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to Chief Rambo next.
Probably with the exception of Chief Luna, I'm the only candidate up here who's actually built community youth centers in the inner city, not only in Compton and Willowbrook, but also up in Antelope Valley. I empathize with that. I've been pulled over before. Trust me, when I was working undercover, I was scared to death about getting pulled over by law enforcement. Community engagement amongst the deputy personnel is important. It's why I want to institute a program where before deputies go out to patrol, as part of patrol training, they also learn community engagement and how to really community organize, work with those collaborative organizations out in the field. There are people in this audience right now that I've worked with on gang intervention work, prevention work with the youth, and I think that engaging the deputies, not just the supervisors, is equally important. Implicit bias training, I'm working with Dr. Earl Southers at USC as we speak on creating a higher level of learning for implicit bias training. I think bringing in higher education to the fold, working with Loyola, I think will be very important as part of an overall training curriculum for law enforcement. When I was a captain, I instituted, there's a Reading Across America program, and I directed my deputies to go and read to the kids, preschoolers and kindergartners in uniform, so they can learn that they're not always looking at the police under a situation where there's something going on. That's a very important program that I've really fully embraced. And then I can tell you, as a city manager and understanding how parks and recreation programs work, I would plan to partner as a sheriff with all of our municipalities, getting with our parks and rec programs, trying to be that force multiplier, working with LA 84, which is money left over from the 84 Olympics that maybe the other candidates aren't aware of, but you can tap into that money so you're not using public funds, but you're using donated funds to develop programs for our youth and really bring about that community engagement. So it's really a holistic approach where you're embracing the community, you're engaging the community, and working with those elected officials to make those relationships happen.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, we are going to go on to Chief Robert Luna.
So when you asked that question, that child in the back seat, that was me. In East LA, while my parents are getting pulled over. Not a good feeling. So to me, this is not just a government issue, a policing issue, it's a very personal issue to me. And that's the way I've always driven my career, from police officer through all the ranks I held, all the way to the chief of police. You represent the NAACP. I encourage you to get a hold of the NAACP president in Long Beach and ask Naomi Rainey what she thinks of Robert Luna and all the work that we've done collectively to improve relationships in Long Beach regarding the specific question you've asked. We have done so much work, still have a lot of work to do. And just to highlight some of it, we have had implicit bias training. We've had cultural sensitivity training. We have put on the most recent, we had a law enforcement history class that I pushed in Long Beach that didn't teach the history of Long Beach PD. What it did is it taught the history of our police officers interacting with people of color and our LGBTQ community in Long Beach, because I wanted police officers who had never encountered somebody like that to know why, when you walk into a household or a business, is somebody going to look at you different, maybe not trust you. We instituted that in the last year. It's been very successful in Long Beach, and I just want to round off by saying, again, I'm not just talking about what I want to do, this is actually what I've done, and because of all my work in Long Beach, I have actually attained 9 different humanitarian awards for my work working hand in hand with all communities of color. And if you know Long Beach, it's one of the most diverse, progressive, dynamic cities in this entire area. And I look forward to taking the same thing to the LA County Sheriff.
Thank you so much.